I feel like I can finally say Brady Singer is firmly a top 3 pitcher in this rotation. Will it last, though? Let's talk about it in this edition of Locked on Royals.
You are Locked on Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked on Royals on the Locked on Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some co-hosting, some producing, and some hosting over there. That's my day job. But after work, when I am having some downtime, that's when I bring you this 30-minute episode of Royals Baseball, which we do Monday through Friday. Now, I want to get out ahead of this because it is a little bit of a programming note. Next week, we're going to have Monday through Friday. And then the week after that, I am going to be out of commission for those 5 days. So the week of, what would that be? The 20th, I think the 20th through the 24th, we will not have any episodes. I'll be on vacation, still keeping up with the Royals, probably tweeting out some stuff, but I'll be on vacation. Won't be bringing you any podcast episodes. So I do apologize about that, but I am going to take some time off. Now, before we get started any further on our episode today, let's give a shout out to our title sponsor at eBay Motors. They're going to have you taken care of. They're going to get the part that you need every single time. And we got more on them coming up in about 15 minutes or so. Well, in a huge statement game today, the Royals got to Kauffman Stadium and I guess had a choice. And that choice was, are you going to roll over and once again have a better team take a series from you? Or are you going to be able to flush the catastrophic loss you suffered on Tuesday Now, maybe you say that's dramatic. Maybe you say that is, maybe stepping over a line of saying catastrophic or a nightmare, anything like that. But I really did feel like last night put this team immediately at a crossroads because that loss angered so many people. And even though, we had comments on our video from last night, and I hope you enjoyed it, but we had comments of, it's 1 of 162. And we did say that in the episode of whether it was 10-0 or they lost in the way they did, it counts the same in the loss column. But the feeling, the emotion of a loss like that, that's what makes things a little bit different. But if you ever needed a reason to believe why this team could be for real, it's games like today where you are tasked with such a huge responsibility of just flushing what happened and going out there and beating a really good baseball team. The Brewers are a very good club. They are likely a playoff team. And you walk away from this series, thanks to the guy we're going to talk about, feeling like you should have swept him. But in the past, right, that Baltimore series on the road, the Baltimore series at home, the Detroit series on the road, the Texas series, well, that team's really good, and we feel like we should have taken the series or swept them. But you didn't. You lost that series. You lost all of those series I just brought up. Today was different. Today you won the series and said we should have had more. And what's great is even as dramatic as that win was for Milwaukee, you think about the Brewers leaving Kansas City. They had that miracle rally in the 9th inning yesterday. That's what it took to avoid a sweep. So who feels better? This Royals team that walks away with the series win and you had a terrible loss, but you found a way to win the series? Or is it Milwaukee going, well, that was a great and fantastic game and is going to be on our highlight reels for maybe the rest of the season and going to be on our holiday replays if they do that on Bally North or whatever it's called for the Brewers. Is it something where you take pride in? I don't think the Brewers are very happy leaving Kansas City with the way they played. But it wasn't like they came in, just and played disastrous ball. It still felt like the Brewers had moments where they were playing really good ball. And in every single one of these games of the series, they had a lead at one point. Whether it was 2-0 or it was 1-0, they had a lead on the Royals, yet they walk away taking 2 of 3. And Brady Singer, which is why I wanted to highlight him tonight. Brady Singer had such a tall task of being the starter who had to go out there after last night's game and not implode on the mound, to not just give that game away in the first inning. And I'll be quite honest with you. The way that game started out, I went, well, it seems like one of those games where they just didn't shake it. They didn't show up to the ballpark focused on the series finale. They were still hung up on the, damn, last night's loss really stung. I mean, 2 batters into the game, it's 1-0 Milwaukee. It should have been 2-0 Milwaukee, but Brady Singer did what James MacArthur couldn't and got Willy Adames out when it mattered. And he gets that strikeout of Adames, and he never allows a run the rest of the afternoon. After William Contreras, pokes that RBI double into left center field, he was not nails, but really good. I would say good enough. He did his job. To throw 5 1/3 of 1-run ball after what happened the night before, that shows to me you can trust Brady Singer in a stopper situation. It wasn't a losing streak he was stopping, but it immediately makes you feel better about this club. That we don't even have to revisit what happened on Tuesday night. And we did discuss that in last night's episode about if you win, you don't completely forget about it, but it takes the sting completely out of that game. Like now you kind of just chalk up Tuesday night with how you chalked up Sunday. A crappy way to lose a baseball game. But they have built this rotation that makes you feel so much better about the longevity of this success. The fact they've gotten Brady Singer to seemingly bounce back. And you feel like you can count on Michael Wacha bouncing back. They get Alec Marsh back this weekend. So the normal 5 are almost back to full health and going to be making starts just right after the other and discussing how great they pitched in the dugout with each other. And I'm not sure this Royals team is 22-16 if it wasn't for this revelation of Brady Singer. And a lot of credit goes to him. A lot of credit goes to Brian Sweeney and Zach Bove being able to change the ways, being able to adjust, to be coachable. Listen, we all harped on Brady Singer last year of how in the world doesn't he throw a changeup? He's so stubborn, he won't throw those pitches. And I remember Brady Singer said in the postgame, look, I can't really focus on a third pitch, or my first 2 or my best 2 are not very good. Because I'm not really challenging anybody with something. And the fact that he got back to a little bit of that velocity, and that velocity was pretty firm in the first inning. He's not running up 95, 96, but 93, 94 looks pretty good with that sinker. And when that came back into play and he got that horizontal run, it made things interesting. Now that slider comes back into play. That 4-seam is more of a command pitch, and that changeup can be thrown every once in a while. That you can see something like this, it makes you feel so much more confident, going into each series. There's not really a drop-off with this group. Like Michael Wacha being the drop-off is not something I really worry about. I think tomorrow he's got a really good chance to get back up on the horse and have a quality start, something that Royals starters have been very accustomed to the beginning part of 2024. But having Brady Singer bounce back almost makes up for MJ Melendez struggling, for Hunter Renfroe and the signing that he was, for Walker's struggles, for some of the bullpen struggles. I mean, getting Brady Singer back was so vital to this team's success. I mean, you think about the offense and its struggles, and they can't do anything through the first 5 innings. Are the Royals 6 games over 500 if they hadn't built a rotation like this? If they didn't have 3 guys emerge as the clear-cut number 1, 2, and 3, being Cole Reagans, being Lugo, being Singer. I mean, we all know that injuries can get in the way. We know that can halt this group. Because at that point, you worry about the depth. Can Jonathan Bowen keep making spot starts? Can Daniel Lynch give you the same thing he did on Sunday? Probably not. It's probably the hit and miss with that, which is what you'd expect for your number 6 and your number 7 starter. But if the Royals only had Reagans and Lugo thriving right now, they may be 500, and that would still be okay. But the fact you've got three guys right now that all can act like a stopper. I mean, Milwaukee came into this series with the second best on-base percentage as a team. And Reagan's threw a quality start, Lugo threw a quality start, and Singer was 2 outs from a quality start. It's just automatic. It's just repetition at this point. And to see this growth, to see this transformation, not necessarily getting back to 2022 Brady Singer, but maybe being the best version of himself that he can be at this point in his career. Just being able to work 5-6 innings, 3 runs or less every single time out. I will take that from my number 3 in the rotation. I feel like I can firmly say that's where Brady Singer is at for me. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I want to bring up a big problem with this bullpen, and it's something that isn't going to change. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to one of the sponsors today and our title sponsor in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And one last reminder that eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Well, the bullpen was pretty shaky in this homestand, and it was a 500 homestand, and I will always say this on this podcast. 500 road trips, 500 homestands are just fine. And then you kind of hope in the in-between when you have a really good road trip, right? You win 5 of 7, you can come back home and just have a 500 homestand. Like, that's just the baseline there. Now, over the grand scheme of things, you hope to have over 500 on the road, and then you hope to play 500 ball, or over 500 at home, and then 500 ball on the road. That's kind of the baseline, what every team strives for. And so far, the Royals have done a lot right in putting themselves in this position of not having long losing streaks. I mean, we're at May 8th, and they're going to take on the Angels for a 4-game set. And the Angels are record-wise one of the worst teams in the American League. And Mike Trout's not going to be available, and they no longer have Shohei Ohtani, of course. And the West Coast road trip has not always been kind to the Royals, but this might be one that goes in their favor. They'll take on the Angels for 4. They'll take on the Mariners earlier next week. Then they'll come back home for the Oakland Athletics and the Detroit Tigers. But I look at how this team has gotten to this point. I look at how this success can be sustained. Of course, the rotation. We just brought up in the first segment there. The rotation is very important for this team getting to the promised land. And I think for this group, the promised land has to start at just getting into the playoffs. And at that point, your hat is in the ring. Anything can happen. We saw Arizona make a tremendous run last year. But getting the hat in the ring is important, and they're not going to be able to do it if the bullpen has, in a crucial, let's say, couple week stretch in the second half, not going to be able to get it done when you have a bullpen blowing 2-run leads with 2 outs in the last inning, right? You're not going to be able to get it done when you have a 8-4 lead and then you look up and you're having to use 4 or 5 arms. Like, eventually guys are going to get gassed. They're going to get fatigued. It's going to become an issue. Now, this problem that I want to highlight is something that maybe not everybody sees as an issue, but it's one that I am going to point out. This bullpen is not bad. Okay, let's get that out in front here. This bullpen's not bad. In fact, they have a decent ERA. It imploded a little bit, against Texas because of that 15-4 game, and they choked it away on Sunday. Then they choked it away on Tuesday. So the ERA's dropped a little bit, but still, it's not a bottom 5 bullpen in this league. There are guys you can count on. There's guys you can trust. James MacArthur, it was great to see him get back out on the horse today and get the save. Angel Serpa's become a really good piece. John Schreiber's been fantastic. Chris Stratton seems very hit or miss. Like, when he's on, it's 8 pitches and he's done. When he's off, he's walking 2 guys an inning, and things can spiral from there. Nick Anderson before today I was about to actually put out a tweet that Nick Anderson had quietly become much better. His velo was spiking. He was going 95, 96, but Gary Sanchez, being the strong man that he is, just guided a 96-mile-an-hour fastball down in the zone over the wall in right center field. And that goes back to the point of why James McArthur maybe nibbled around Gary Sanchez last night. I don't think he wanted to just feed him a fastball because Gary Sanchez can do that, and he did it to Cole Reagans as well. But this problem at hand, I think it is an issue that they don't really have a big-time strikeout arm where it's the eighth inning and McArthur and Schreiber and Serpa can't go. They need to bring in this workhorse, if you will, to come in, fire in 97, 98, 99, and not wildly, but you can get the swing and miss. And the Royals in the past have had some of those guys. Josh Staumont was a big swing and miss pitcher. Dylan Coleman before the velo drop, good swing and miss pitcher. Scott Barlow was as well. And when he had the velocity on his side, he was really a good strikeout pitcher. But McArthur's not, Schreiber's not, Stratton's not, Serpa's not, Nick Anderson's not, Tyler Duffy's not, Will Smith isn't, Matt Sauer's not. So there's the options. And yeah, Carlos Hernandez and John McMillan were going to be the firepower. They were going to be the fire-breathing dragons coming out of the bullpen that could hurl in there 98, 99, 100, 101. Here's also the weird thing, though. Hernandez isn't a strikeout pitcher. He throws hard. He does not strike out a lot of guys. And he's still slowly working his way back up from Omaha after being delayed in spring training because of a setback. John McMillan, same thing. And John McMillan's velo has not been where it was last year. So that was the hope. And I almost wonder, with these guys, the reason I teased it on the break of it ain't going to change because we're not going to see John Schreiber all of a sudden be pumping 97, 98. We're not going to see Chris Stratton running it up 95, 96. We're not going to see James McArthur touching 99 and 100. That's just not the case here. They can sit low to mid 90s, but that's not the high-powered stuff I'm talking about. Will Klein has that, and I do think Will Klein's going to have a role in this bullpen sooner rather than later. I think that Jonathan Boland's going to get a chance in this bullpen. I think Walter Pennington will as well, but he's also low to mid-90s. Maybe he's the swing and miss you've been needing, and maybe that's what I should tailor it to. Not so much the high velocity, but the swing and miss. You need to be able to generate strikeouts coming out of the bullpen. Otherwise, you are giving other teams a better chance of getting a rally together. If you are going to be low 90s, you got to have pinpoint control. You got to generate the soft contact. And some guys in this bullpen can. Like I said, it's not a bad bullpen by any means. And I'm actually much higher on the bullpen than people are even after last night or even after today. I thought Tyler Duffy before today had become somebody you could count on to get 3 outs, but the command slipped away from him. But he still got stuff that moves, that looks good. But that is one thing I think can really take this team to another level, that this bullpen can bring in a fire breather. You look around at some of the great bullpens out there, and, you can start in the American League Central. The fact that Cleveland at the end of the game can go to Emmanuel Clase and his 100-mile-an-hour cutter, it's, that's more so of a fortune that a lot of teams don't have. But still, it's this feeling of how are you going to string it together against Clase? The Royals have done it before, but many teams this year and in previous years have not been able to do it. Last year they had Aroldis Chapman. When Aroldis Chapman was on, you just weren't going to hit him. He was hitting 103, 104, and now he's not very good this year. You look at Detroit in their bullpen. Now, Detroit, coughed up a lead today. They've coughed up a couple of leads. As good as Detroit's bullpen is overall, they have their issues. But Foley runs at 99, 100. Chafin can throw pretty hard. Even guys, local guy, Joey Wentz, it just can get more swing and miss. And, it's not everybody in that bullpen, but I'm more so trying to highlight somebody like Foley. He's the closer. He's the back end guy. And James McArthur, again, I think he's a very good arm. But to be able to go to somebody else, maybe in a spot like today instead of Duffy, let's go to Carlos Hernandez. Let's go to John McMillan. Right now you can't. Let's go to Will Klein. And you can just trust that, he's got the stuff that's going to make it really hard to mount a comeback. Again, they've got some reinforcements. But right now, the one thing that's not going to change with this bullpen is how hard they throw. And maybe not the swing and miss because they don't have more of the overpowering stuff. Let us know your thoughts on that on YouTube or on Twitter. You can always find me at JohnnyJ_15. Okay, before we move on to our final segment, a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, the outfield has been at least a problem offensively and bigger than most out there, especially of teams over 500. But is there a prospect I'm starting to come around on that could be a future fix for this outfield? We'll talk about that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to the final sponsor today in PrizePicks. Spring training is over and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entries today. You can also get on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during this basketball postseason. Again, with PrizePicks, very, very fun to use. And use our code of Locked On MLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's Locked On MLB, LOCKEDON MLB, for a first deposit match of up to $100. Well, we know pretty much everything we need to know about the outfield, how they're playing, what the ceiling may be, if some of these guys are going to get going. We've had plenty of conversations on this podcast, whether it be on YouTube, or you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the same damn thing, or if you follow me on Twitter. You know we've had these discussions. But what I've always tried to relay is the Royals are not going to make a move with the outfield until they actually have a legitimate fix, right? And it may be somewhere else. They wanted to trade for Luis Arraez last week. It didn't happen. So they move onward. Back to hoping that MJ Melendez, Kyle Isbell, and Hunter Renfroe are going to be able to give you enough in this lineup. Now, MJ Melendez made a game-saving play today just on the defensive side of things. Offensively, he looks just lost at the plate. Right? I can admit that. I'm a big MJ guy. He's lost at the plate. Kyle Isbell has actually been much better of late. And with his defense out there, I want Kyle Isbell out there every single day. He's starting to come around a little bit. It may be a short spell. It may not be able to last very long. But to me, he is somebody that is so good defensively. And what he's doing right now is just fine, especially the 9-hole. Also, if he doesn't have this stretch go that long, he's a 9-hole hitter. Right? You're not going to have a lot of great 9-hole hitters no matter where you look in Major League Baseball. Now, I also get it. Somebody's listening and going, Drew Waters, right? Drew Waters is the fix. And I do believe Drew Waters gets a chance, and I would say sooner rather than later. You know, the way Hunter Renfroe's playing, I don't know how much longer you can keep running him out there every single day and expect things to change. I really believe it's May for Hunter Renfroe, and that may be it. You know, that may be your telltale sign of he ain't turning things around. Or, you know, you could move Hunter Renfroe to the bench because he's got that power, and he, in his career, has shown that he's got tremendous power, and you option Nelson Velasquez back down, who's not even playing every day anymore. The first 5 hitters, you know who it's usually going to be. Like we said last night, the bottom 4, it's pull a name out of a hat. Somebody's playing somewhere in the bottom 4 there. But Drew Waters can be a guy, right? I do think Drew Waters is in a Royals uniform at some point over the next month or so, whether it's due to injury, whether it's due for a guy struggling. He's hitting so well in Omaha that it makes sense. But now this domino move becomes a little bit more interesting. If Drew Waters goes up to Kansas City, it's going to open up a spot in the outfield. And I don't know if you've been keeping up with it or you haven't been following, you know, Alex Duvall on Twitter and Preston Farr on Twitter, 2 guys that have been all over Gavin Cross this year. He's been tremendous in Double-A. Absolutely tremendous and much better of late. And Gavin Cross just turned 23, so he's not a a 19 or a 20-year-old. You need to slowly work into things. He's 23. So if he continues to hit the way that he does, and that may be what the Royals are thinking, let's wait until Gavin Cross has a big enough sample size there. You don't want to rush him because remember last year he had the tick-borne illness, or it was something called like the something mountain tick virus, or it was weird, but completely immobilized him. It wasn't able to play, was really sick from it, and it completely changed his entire season. Now he's back. Now he's healthy. And I remember in spring training, I think it was Paul Gibson might have been saying this to me and Seren Petrov. He was hitting the tops of trees, in batting practice. And he looked really, really good. And he looked stronger. And that swing was back. And he was a first-round pick. And he was somebody that, so early into his career, he just struggled. And I went, well, there you go again. I didn't want to give up on him. But it was, when are you going to get a guy that just immediately moves up quicker? And you're not going, well, he's 25 in Double-A. Yeah, he's hitting well, but he's 25 in Double-A. No, Gavin Cross could be that domino move of Drew Waters goes up to Kansas City, spot opens up in Omaha, there goes Gavin Cross. But we're not talking about Gavin Cross being a future fix for next year's outfield or the year after that. I think you hope at that point he is an everyday outfielder because he was first-round talent. He becomes one of your better prospects. Slid down the boards a little bit because of last year's class and guys that were thriving more so than him. But I'm talking about this year. I am on the train now, and I am of the belief that if the Royals are in serious contention, and this is second half, this is August, this is September, it wouldn't surprise me if Gavin Cross continues this trend that they look to him as a fix, that they look to him as a guy that for maybe the playoffs or a last push in the month of September, they turn to him. Because of the outfield depth in this organization. If you call up Drew Waters and Drew Waters doesn't work, maybe you do look elsewhere. Maybe you look for someone at the trade deadline. But I wonder if Gavin Cross, being a college bat, being a little bit more of a seasoned prospect, it is only year 3 for him. But he's a guy that maybe you do fast track. Or maybe you take it slow like you did with Vinny Pasquantino. He's tearing it up in Double-A, tearing it up in Omaha, and you just go, he's going to stay down there for the full year. We've seen the Royals do that before. Just keep a guy down there all year long. Let him hit his tail off. Let him have the confidence. You don't want to force him into a situation he won't be comfortable with. And I'm not saying Gavin Cross wouldn't want to play in the major leagues this year, but it's a lot of pressure to put on somebody to be the quote-unquote fix, right? I think the Royals really highlighted this, and this was still in the Dayton Moore era, not the J.J. Picollo era. But when Carlos Santana was really struggling in 2022, and Vinny Pasquantino was just scorching the ball in Omaha, everybody, including me, said, why are they not making the change? This seems like the perfect time to just switch him out. DFA Carlos Santana or trade him and bring up Vinny Pasquantino. Well, the Royals didn't want to just cut bait with Santana because of trade value, but also they didn't want to bring him up to be the fix. The offense is so bad, they're not getting any runs, and now let's put pressure on a guy in the middle of our lineup who's a rookie to be that guy to drive in runs, to be the table setter. It's a lot of pressure to put on somebody, even if they were to call Gavin Cross up and be hitting 7th, 8th, or 9th in the lineup. It's still a lot of pressure, and especially if that team is in postseason contention. But it does feel like it's a possibility, at least. Not so much because you need to rush him, but because the outfield depth in this organization is so thin. If Tyler Gentry was hitting better, he would be right behind Drew Waters, not hitting better. Nick Lofton could be that guy, but I don't think they see him as an everyday outfielder. They just see him as being that super utility guy, likely to take over for Garrett Hampson whenever they decide to discard Garrett Hampson, DFA him, or I don't even think he's got a minor league option, to be honest with you. But that, to me, feels like the best fit for Nick Lofton. We're talking about starters here. Drew Waters, I think, undeniably, has the first crack from Omaha. But if it's not Drew Waters, and you're looking further down the road, and you need somebody to play every single day, maybe Gavin Cross works his way into that conversation. Never would have thought that last year, but the way he's played this year, though very early, I don't know how much longer you keep him down in Double-A. He's been that good. I'd let him at least hit the first half there I'd keep him in Double-A and make sure that, the slumps, they're not super long, and then he just keeps terrorizing Double-A pitching, and you send him to Triple-A, where it actually, in my opinion, gets easier. And you get some 4A guys and, some washed up players, guys that aren't very good anymore. I always think it's harder to thrive in Double-A than it is in Triple-A. Double-A, you're facing some prize prospects, right? You had some top arms, some top 100s they've already had to face this year. But to me, it's at least something to keep on your radar for now. I'm not going to make the prediction he will be on the roster this year, but with the outfield depth in this organization, he's at least worth mentioning at this point in time. So we'll see how that all plays out, but a really good start to the year for Gavin Cross. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15 and find our podcast on wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to preview a little bit of this series of the Angels and if Michael Wacha can get back on track. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.